What? Yes, Ariel's coming today. I know he's a friend of yours, he's a friend of mine too. We're very happy to get to talk to him. What do you have to say? Really? You can't use that kind of language on video, man. Clean it up for the kids. That's better. Okay, thanks.
Unboxed.
There's a new breed in the neighborhood. Some say they're just no good. Half shark, half man, fighting evil, that's the plan. Street sharks. Street sharks. Street sharks. Oh, that's awesome.
¿Qué tal, coleccionistas? El día de hoy tenemos en nuestro canal a alguien muy especial para mí y muy especial para todos los coleccionistas de Street Sharks. Mi querido Joe Galeani nos abrió las puertas de su casa para poder hacerle unas preguntas y saber un poquito más a fondo de esta colección tan icónica y que tanto nos gusta de Street Sharks.
Welcome to my home and happy to have you
Thank
here.
you very much. Tell us about how you got in the toy industry and what did you do before you created Street Sharks line?
So I wound up in the toy industry completely by accident. My wife and I, in the early 80s, were working together at the same place. And that's because she got me a job after I became her boyfriend.
Oh, wow, awesome.
And she worked for an entrepreneur who ran several businesses, and I learned a lot about business from this gentleman. And one of the businesses that he started was the American Portrait Society for portrait painters. And there was one in England, but there was none in the United States. And he wanted to be able to interact and be friends with all the most famous portrait painters in America. He was an aspiring portrait painter.
Okay.
But he wasn't very good. But he was very smart as a businessman, and he started this society, and he made all of the top portrait painters in America guest members and put them on the advisory board. And they all agreed, and he had instant credibility. And then he hired me. He knew I was a writer, and I was writing screenplays at this time. I wanted to make movies.
Okay.
And he knew I was a writer and I wasn't making any money. And he offered me a job to be the editor of a magazine for the American Portrait Society. And so I dove in and I worked full-time for him, and I did edit that magazine. I met all the top portrait painters from around the world. Long story short, we worked for this gentleman. I really enjoyed that. And then one day, he came into the office and told us that he had lost all of his money in an investment that turned out to be a scam. Very famous thing here in California in the 80s. A lot of rich people lost a lot of money in this scam, and we were out of work, and we were on unemployment for a while. And my wife started to do temp work, and she got a temporary job at Mattel as a secretary. And it turned out really well, and they hired her. And then I started to feel guilty. My wife is working, I'm home, writing screenplays that nobody wants to make into movies. And I said, see if you can get me a job at Mattel. I'll do anything, and I'll write at night. And I immediately felt less guilty.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Because you're trying at this point, right?
Yeah, but then she called the same day and she said, hey, I got you a job.
Wow, that's awesome.
Yes. And I
That's
thought,
a very effective wife of yours.
yes, well, she really wanted me to be making some money. And she said, you're going to be a board turner in the samples department. They're doing line previews. And that all sounded like Spanish to me. I didn't understand a word of it.
Okay.
But I went in and she said, you'll be making $8 an hour through the temp agency. And so I went in, and they told me that a board turner is the guy that's backstage when they're at the presentation theater in Mattel. And they have these turntable stages where half of it is in the theater and the other half is backstage. And so you would set up the toys that they wanted to show the buyers. But here's next year's toys. And my job was to set up the toys and then take them off when the thing turned around and set up for the next show. And this is 1985. And so the He-Man is a big part of the line, and He-Man at that point had, I don't know, 20 characters maybe.
Yeah.
And people are yelling at me, give me Buzzbee, give me Grizzle. And I didn't know any of these names, and I was terrible at this job until somebody took pity on me and put labels on the bottom of every doll stand
that's
with
awesome.
the names. And they also, and you may have seen this photo, they said, take these home, one of each of these He-Men, and learn who they are and get to know them.
Really?
Yeah, and so I thought, I don't need to take them out of package to do that. I'll just read the package copy, and so that's
and I
how.
saved them.
Yeah, and that's how I have now, in 2022, still He-Man characters that I got in samples. But that was the best job you could get at Mattel in terms of you interacted with everybody. And
I bet you get to know a lot of interesting people, right?
oh yeah, yeah. And you got to do, hey, you want to make extra money and drive the truck to Arizona for pre-toy fair? You bet. Yeah, I do. So I met everybody, and backstage too, working on line previews, you got to hear the marketing people do their pitch. Some of them would do skits or songs or whatever they had to do to try to sell something, and they were pretty awful. They were writing their own stuff, and at that time, I had a show on television, on public television, that paid me practically nothing, but I could tell people, hey, you could see that I'm a writer because I have this show on television. Yeah. And so I started to make suggestions to the marketing people on what they could do better in their pitches. And long story short, I started to get work writing those pitches for them. And that led to everything at Mattel. Because I met all the executives as well, and I let them know that I was also a speechwriter. And so I started writing speeches for the executives. And then they started to do award shows. And I wrote all the award shows, the Creative Excellence Award Show, the Latin American Award Show, the International Award Show. And the best thing that I did was the Outside Inventors Award Show. So most of Mattel's line comes from the inside, or they license something, but they are open to known inventors, and then they give awards to the inventors at the end of the year, whose toy did best, which was most creative, et cetera, et cetera.
Oh, wow, I didn't know that.
Yeah, well, because it's only in-house.
That's very cool. And that's how you start the Street Sharks line?
Well, yes, and how that happened is a guy that worked with me at Mattel got the rights to Major Matt Mason, Mattel's Man in Space, which I did not have as a kid, but he loved. And Mattel let the rights slip, and he bought them.
Wow, really?
Yes, and it was the I don't remember.
And Matt Mason was pretty successful.
Oh yeah, in the 60s, but then by the 80s and 90s, nobody was thinking about Matt Mason.
Was old.
Star Wars. Yeah. This compared to Star Wars. But so my friend got the license, and he said, I want to do a graphic novel, and I want you to write the story. So I did, and we called it Men from Earth, and we went to Comic-Con. I think it was the first Comic-Con in 1991.
Oh, wow.
And we got a table, and we showed our graphic novel, and there were so many better products there than ours. But a guy came to our table named David Siegel, and he said, I've read your book, I like this, and I want to license this comic book and turn it into a toy. And we were like, I can't believe that. This is the first thing we've ever done. We came the first go, this is fantastic. And he gave us offices at his place of business. And we started to develop this into a toy. And we were there maybe 2 weeks when Siegel calls me into his office without the other guy, whose name was Joe also. And he says, hey, do you always work with this guy as your partner? And I said, no, this is the first time we're partners. He said, so if I wanted to hire you to do something else,
would you do it?
Would you do it? Because we don't need him. He's the illustrator. We have our own illustrator for this. But I said, sure, I'm a freelancer. I'm open for business. So he said, I want to do something with sharks. I did something with dinosaurs riding motorcycles, and the key to it was I used one mold and 4 different painted decos so that it was really cheap for me to do, and I made a lot of money. But this time, I want to have a story. He said we didn't have a story, or the characters didn't matter where they were from or how dinosaurs came to be riding motorcycles. I said, okay, yeah, I can do that. And I negotiated with him. For $5,000, I will create 4 characters I'll do a page on each of the characters of who they are. I'll do their origin story of how they came to be. I'll outline a toy line. I'll outline an animated series. And in the toy line, I'll outline 2 or 3 years of development, including vehicles and play sets. And he said, wow, that's great. I said, yeah, that's how Mattel does it. So that's what I'll do for you. But I promised him, I think, 5 or 6 pages that I would come back with. And he was fine with that. But then I started to work on it. And the first thing I did was, there's a library walking distance from where I live here. And I went down there because a lot of kids go to that library. I said, I'd like to check out all the books on sharks you have for kids. And they said, all right, here, sign your name on the list. And I said, what do you mean? They said, it's a waiting list. Our shark books are always checked out. Boys love sharks.
Yeah.
Ding.
I always remember something you told me when we first met, that kids, especially boys, all you have to do for kids is sharks or dinosaurs, right?
Seemingly, although, you know, turtles seem to work too.
Yeah.
So, but what I think, you know, I had a lot of good luck. But what wasn't good luck was, instead of 5 pages, I did 15 pages.
Oh, wow.
Because I just got into it. And when I came back, I pitched it to him. And then he tells me what he didn't tell me to begin with. He says, great, I love this. Now you have to get us a meeting with Mattel. And I said, I don't work that way with Mattel. I'm not an inventor.
Yeah.
I work for the design center. I work for those. I do presentations for them and stuff. And he said, well, you got to get us a meeting. And so I went to Dave Okada, who was the head of Boys Toys Design then. And I was good friends with Dave. I wrote all his speeches. He was the guy that co-hosted the Outside Inventor Award show every year. So he knew me and I knew him. And I told him, I got a crazy story for you. Did this comic book, did you know that Joe Ferreira has the rights to Major Man? No. Yeah. Well, we did this book and this guy licensed it and now I've developed this thing. Well, tell me about it. And I start to tell him about it. He said, we would take a meeting on that. And I said,
wow.
Really?
Like that?
Yeah. And
Wow,
I said,
that's awesome.
Yeah, that's what I thought. And I said, okay, great. And so, you know, we had the meeting and I knew every person. I mean, I knew everybody in the meeting.
Okay, so at this point you pitched the idea to the Mattel executives and they say yes right away?
Yes, and then that begins a long process.
Okay.
And I was recently looking at my notes from that. And the process is a series of testings, focus group testing with children, a whole series of steps that you have to get to, maybe 15 steps before there's even the possibility of showing something to customers at first a line preview, like I was the board turner for. Mattel also back then did pre-toy fair, pre-toy fair, and then toy fair in February. And so starting with line presentations, and each one of these is designed to bring in the top buyers and get their feedback as they progress. And what happens almost always is the toy that was so fantastic in line previews gets cost reduced down because everything has these great features.
Yeah.
And then,
especially when you imagine something, you want it to be the best toy ever.
oh yeah, and then marketing
And when they have to
costing,
produce it,
yep.
it's just like it's going to be like $1,000 toy, so you have to bring it down, way down.
Oh yeah, and they all know this, and why they don't start with, hey, yeah, that's a nice idea that it's going to do that, but it's never going to happen. Why don't you start here? But maybe in order to get there, you need to do all those steps. And they were chasing really stupid properties like Demolition Man and The Last Action Hero. Do you remember that? Yeah, that I remember when Arnold Schwarzenegger came to the building.
Rocky, Rambo.
Yeah. Well, that was Demolition Man.
Yeah.
And Last Action Hero was Schwarzenegger.
Correct.
And
Commando.
yes, but Mattel licensed the rights to Last Action Hero, and it made the Street Sharks possible because it did so poorly in all the testing, and the buyers hated it, that there was this big hole in the boys' toy line for Toy Fair. And so Street Sharks got fast-tracked.
We're the Street Sharks. Yeah. Awesome.
And I knew
that's
that.
awesome. So you were always at the right time in the right moment.
Yeah, and a lot of that is luck, but it's knowing what to do in the right moment too. Because when
and having a good product.
yes,
right?
yes, but look, the street shark. This is definitely the true story of evolution of toys, because what we brought Mattel made the street sharks that got produced possible. But what Mattel did to what we brought them took it light years to the future. You know, we brought them crude looking models and ideas that they took to the next level. And it was fun when it started, going back and forth with Alton, because they were very respectful of me as the co-creator. And so everything got ran past me, and we had long back and forths of, well, what if it was this, or what if the backstory, or what if the paranoid was this? And so that was a lot of fun. And then after that part came the not fun, because you asked what happened after that meeting. There was a series of stressful worries about how is it going to do here, and at every point along the line could have been cut off and done, and then they could have just paid the amount they paid the license.
And especially when you know about this process, right?
Oh yeah. And the worst part for me was the CEO, Jill Barad at the time, who I wrote all of her stuff for, came and said, you know, congratulations, we love this toy, but you can't write stuff for us anymore. And I knew that any money from sales of Street Sharks was a couple of years away, because that's a long process. And I said, what do you mean? I was devastated. And she said, well, you're an inventor now, and you have all of our secrets 2-3 years in advance, because you're writing everything for us, and that would give you an unfair advantage, and all the other outside inventors would be furious and wouldn't do business with us. And I said, oh, wow. Because I had no way to make a living then if I couldn't do that. And I came back to her the next day and I said, what if I promised you that I would never invent anything anymore? This was a fluke. I wrote a comic book, a guy licensed it, he asked me to create this for him. I wasn't out there looking to invent toys. And she said, why would you do that? And I said, because I make a really good living doing this. I like the work we do. I'm already deep into, you know, next year's line, and I'm not interested in making another toy. That's not where I'm headed. I want to do movies. Okay. And so she said, well, then you could keep writing for us, and we'll tell anybody that asks that you did this as a one-off, and that you're not.
You said this to the executive?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Oh, yeah. I was close enough with her. I used to be asked to come to the house on Saturday so we can work on a speech.
That's awesome.
Yeah, so, and she was great. And that was a great part of Mattel too, because the reason I was close with Jill Barad was the first time Mattel decided to do an award show, she was made the co-host. And I wrote the show, and I made her the star that made fun of the other co-host, who was a guy from accounting or something. And so she got all these laugh lines, and she said, you're going to write everything for me from now on. So things changed at that point with the Street Sharks, but we were already so far down the line that my work was done. Because Mattel, depending on how they license something from you and what it is, if it's an existing entertainment property like a book or a movie, then the original creator is going to have a lot of influence to stay true to the original material. But if it's a brand new product that can go anywhere and has no story to be loyal to, Mattel wants to be the driving force behind those creative decisions. And as a one-time inventor, I didn't force the issue. I had a hard enough time not being cut out of the project by David Siegel, who turned out to be not a nice guy.
Okay.
I have in my files also that I found the apology letter that he was forced to send to me and my wife.
Oh, wow.
For being an asshole. When Mattel said, we want this, when I got home, I got a call from David Siegel. And I thought, boy, he's gonna invite me to dinner. We're gonna have some big celebration. And instead he said, this is really great, and now we need to renegotiate our deal.
Oh, wow.
And
he did that to you?
Oh, yeah. And I said,
wow,
why would I want to renegotiate? Because I had 10% in the deal. If the thing sold to Mattel, I had royalties. And he said, well, that's the way I always do business. He said, you know, we make an agreement, well, what if? And then if it happens, then things get real. And so, you know, we can't give you 10%. And I said, well, then you're not going to have a deal with Mattel. And he said, what do you mean? I said, I'll kill this deal. And he said, oh, you would never do that. And he said, and your wife works there too. How's this going to look on her? She's in licensing. She was part of this deal. And I said,
Wow.
really? You think this is going to look bad on us? I said, we're part of Mattel's family. We've been there since
Yeah.
'85. You know, they know us. And I said, and they don't know you. And I said, and believe me when I say, I don't need this. This is nice, but I'll kill this deal in a minute. I don't operate this way. So, long story short, my lawyer came down hard on them and forced them to give me 12% instead of 10% as a.
Wow. So he got
And-
back at him.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
That's good.
Well, you know, my last name is Italian.
Yeah.
So, and then there was animosity and conflict between me and him from then on.
And this is a question for everybody out there because everybody wants to know this. What's your favorite character from Street Sharks? I know it's a hard one because it's very hard
No,
for
it's
me
not
to
hard
pick.
at all. It's one that I did not conceive of, but that I love from the standpoint of the toy itself, and it's Moby Lick.
Yes, my most perfect creation yet. I think I'll call you Moby Lick. Now let's see if you can live up to your name and lick those sharks.
Okay.
And just because it's so out of left field. I don't think anyone would have suspected that, A, you know, it's not really a shark, right?
Yeah.
He's an orca, right? And then B, he's got tongue lashing motion. There was some...
Which is funny.
Yes.
That action, I don't think that will work in the present toy
No,
market.
No.
You think?
no. But I have to say, too, that my favorite line of the Street Sharks is the Space Force.
Space Force?
Yes, only because that, again, I'm impressed when creative direction goes where I would not have thought to take it. So the Night Fighters were more
Especially when you have such special product, which is a shark on the streets,
And now we're
and now
putting them in a
you're
space
putting them into space.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's something like you never think is going to happen, right?
But once you see it, you say, "Oh yeah, that works."
It's amazing that it did.
And you can only imagine too, if we had gone more years with the line, the kind of vehicles and play sets we could have done it for
We
space.
never got a play set.
No, we
That's so sad.
Well, can you imagine how big and expensive and heavy it would have been?
I think that's the reason we never got it.
Yeah. Well, and that because the line petered out. You know, the average toy line, if you last as long as the Street Sharks, that's a hit.
I know. What are your feelings about the prices going up now and that they are now collectibles?
Well, I have to say that I'm not surprised. And I'm not surprised because when I worked on the Street Sharks, I also did a lot of work for Barbie and Hot Wheels. And Barbie and Hot Wheels were always, by the time I was at Mattel in the 80s, they were already so established that they were already very expensive collectibles. And in a period in the 90s, the Barbie collectibles shot through the roof. For example, Mattel gave out a special Barbie to everybody that attended the 30th anniversary special at Lincoln Center, which I wrote.
Oh wow, that's awesome.
That's why I'm Mr. Barbie at AOL.com still. But I remember that there were collectors out on the street outside of this event, which was only for invitation only, it wasn't to the public. I had a friend that said, somebody gave me $5,000 for my Barbie from the event.
Wow, in the 90s.
Yes, on the street.
Wow.
So my wife and I both worked at Mattel, and that's when we started putting new toys away in cartons in the attic. And so I have, you know.
That's where you got the idea from?
Oh yeah. Oh, and I
wow.
said to Deborah,
That's awesome.
Deborah tells people who say, wow, that was so lucky that you saved all those toys from
Yeah.
the Street Sharks. And we say, no, it wasn't luck.
It was a privilege of knowledge,
Yeah.
right?
Well, and almost you may have noticed on a lot of my Street Shark toys that I've sold that they all have price stickers on them.
Yeah.
that's because I bought them at retail. They don't, you know, if Mattel gives you a carton, they don't come with price stickers from the store. No. So I believe strongly enough that when the boys that were playing with the Street Sharks then were, yes, and I said, when these guys are in their 30s, if the world hasn't fallen apart, they will want to, like almost everybody does, recapture part of their childhood. And I think that's what collecting is all about. Well, immediately following the Street Sharks, I got my wife's permission to spend whatever I wanted to spend from that money on helping the United States National Parks. And I had a good friend who is a brilliant graphic designer and artist who worked for MGM, designing all of their, at that time, video box releases and Laserdisc releases and DVD. We, both big hikers, went to parks together. We decided to create products for the national parks. One thing I learned was, all the names of the national parks are in the public domain. You don't have to license them. If you want to make a Yosemite something or Yellowstone or Grand Canyon, you can make it and you don't have to pay anybody a royalty.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Wow. Didn't know that.
So we did. And we designed original logos for Yellowstone and Yosemite and El Capitan. And we designed hats and shirts and everything made in the United States, very expensive. So my buddy Mike and I got together and we started the Parks Company. And we started creating products and with a goal of giving 10% of all proceeds, whether it was profit or not, to fund national park projects around the country.
Wow. I forget something. I bring something for you. I remember last time when we chat in this same office, you told me about some of my work that you really like, that I've been working with a couple of friends in Mexico.
Oh yeah?
And I got something for you. I got a gift from Mexico. And it involves Mexico and involves toys, which we love. So I really hope you enjoy them. And sorry, I'm gonna take them out of there.
Wow.
I don't know if you know who this is. This is El Santo, a Mexican wrestler.
El Santo means?
Saint.
The Saint.
The Saint.
Does his mask come on?
And no.
Okay, I won't try to pull it
and this is
fantastic.
And this is Blue Demon, which is, in my opinion, the second
nice articulation.
most famous wrestling man in Mexico. This is Blue Demon.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank
You're welcome.
Nobody ever gives me toys now. I love that.
Last but not least, do you have a message for all the audience, for all the collectors, or to people in general?
Yeah, I have probably more than one message, but I'll keep it short. To collectors, especially anybody who's a member of the FinForce Street Sharks family, much love. I made this toy for you when you were kids, and I made it the way I would have liked it when I was a kid. The fact that you've loved it so long and have woven it into your lives brings me great joy. And my message for all of you is BIF, B-I-F, believe in fun. Try to make everything you do fun. If you are forced to do something, make it fun. If you have a choice of doing something that's fun or not fun, I say always choose fun. You will never regret later in life the fun you had now. And my bigger message is take care of one another. And that means take care of the environment. Try to remember the rule that we use when we go camping and hiking, and that is leave only footprints. Try to leave a place a little better than you found it when you got there. And that's it.
That's awesome. Thank you very much.
Thank you, man.
Appreciate you, and I appreciate you opening your house again and letting me do this interview, because it's very important for me.
If you'd like to do me a great personal favor, please subscribe and like, because you know I do.